Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Art Side of Life, where I chat with inspiring artists and create various art related videos. My name is Eva, and my guest today is David Owens. And in this episode, you will learn good tips how to make living by doing art and why you need to learn the fundamentals first.
For the most part, it's just going back to, the fundamentals. It's these ideas about composition, about lighting, about color. They've been around for thousands of years. There's so much to learn from the Renaissance all the way. I mean, you got 1,000 years of art right there, right, to look at. And I think that was one of the most helpful things, was just getting like a solid foundation, more or less. Understanding composition, understanding color theory, understanding all those things, and then you can apply it.
David is a freelance illustrator and art director based in central New York. He has worked as a communication designer and art director for a variety of brand-related projects for universities, corporate clients, and several national brands. David's focus is on editorial illustration for publications, product licensing, brand development, and advertising, and art directing for various regional and international campaigns. David also teaches illustration classes and how to be a thriving artist. So please welcome David Owens, and let's get to the interview. So welcome everyone to the next episode of Art Side of Life, and I'm super happy to have David here. Hi!
Hey Eva, how's it going?
Oh, great. And I'm super happy that you joined us here. And let's just start directly with your background, and maybe you can share some of your creative outlets as a child, and then we can move on to like the biggest decisions, how you got to art career.
Sure. So my elevator pitch.
That would be perfect. 60 seconds.
Yeah, I went to school for I did a BFA in graphic design. Mm-hmm. And growing up, I knew I liked art, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to get into it as an industry. I didn't really know that I could or couldn't draw for the rest of my life. That's what I did. I always drew. I always sketched. All my math notebooks were full of sketches, as I'm sure a lot of other artists can relate to. And so it was kind of natural that I ended up in a program that was had a lot of different options, I think. Mm-hmm. It was a state school. I went there. I saved a little bit of money by doing that, and it was interesting. I remember really clearly in high school. My dad, I talked to him a bit, and he was very practical in that way. And he said, because I was looking at some pretty big design schools and things like that, and thinking about what do I want to do, advertising or illustration or communication design. And I remember he had listened to some sort of show. And it was on the radio, I think, at the time. And he came to me. He didn't know anything about art. He had no art background. But he said, I was listening to such and such a show, and they said that you can go to any school you want, but what matters at the end of the day is your portfolio. Mm-hmm. And it actually made an impression on me. I still remember it, years later. And it stuck with me because it's so true. And you see so many people in the industry today. Mm-hmm. There used to be no such thing as viz dev. Visual development is so new in that way. For example, you always have kind of those traditional graphic design illustration programs. But the truth of it is you can go into this if you have the eye for it and you have the dedication to develop the technique. So in that way, I've kind of always taken that approach. And I've always been trying to learn more, and whatever the new technology is, I want to kind of be part of it. So it was interesting. I started out in like a graphic design program and really found probably by junior year, maybe beginning of senior year, so fairly late, that I loved illustration. Yeah. And I switched my concentration to illustration and started working on my portfolio. And I remember I worked really, really hard. I knew I had to. I was switching more, and I wasn't switching majors, but I was really switching direction. Yeah. And I didn't know that, illustration commercially was a real thing anymore. I knew there was book illustration, but that's what everyone thinks of, right? And still when I tell people, oh, I do a lot of illustration, they think, oh, you do children's books?
Yeah, they're like, for what?
Right, exactly. And but it was interesting. When I was in college, I started freelancing as well. Mm-hmm. And I got some really good jobs as a senior
Yeah.
in at the university, and I didn't tell any of these clients that I was a student or anything like that. But they were really good jobs, and some of the first ones I had were actually architectural, like rendering. And now I think with Revit and the different technologies, I probably wouldn't stand a chance in that market. But at the time, I did some architectural illustration, and it was great. It paid great, and I thought, geez, I could do this for the rest of my life, kind of thing. And I got out, and I was working part time just as a graphic designer for a local company, and I actually had some offers to kind of go into graphic design roles that I thought might turn into art directing roles or like communication manager type roles, and I turned them aside at the time, and I just wanted to kind of develop my illustration. Yeah. And so as I was doing the part time work, I got some other really great jobs. One of the first jobs I got that was out of school that was really kind of a big deal was a packaging job. And I did illustrations for a series of packaging. It was a fairly local company, but globally known. And there's still an NDA on it. I still can't release the work. But at the time, I had done all the research, and I at least knew, what that job was worth. So it paid really, really well. And I thought, geez, I just made a couple months worth of work in a week or whatever. Yeah. And I thought, I was at the at the top of the world in that way. And that was kind of the moment I realized, I could do this full-time freelance. Yeah. And since then, I was always educating myself, meeting other illustrators, asking them questions, meeting art directors, sending out postcards, sending out, mass emails, posting on LinkedIn. Slowly but surely, I started getting a following there, and that's actually been really good. I think I have close to 15,000 followers on there now, and a lot of works come from that.
From LinkedIn or from which social media?
LinkedIn, and then I post pretty regularly on Instagram. I tried Tumblr for a while and just couldn't really get into it. I tried Facebook, and there's just, I don't know, too many people, too much non-work related stuff to where Instagram has been my main thing, and then LinkedIn. So.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because LinkedIn, I have never thought about it in that perspective, that to put actually more artworks or kind of what I work on there, because it's like online portfolio, it's sitting there. Right. But it's more like a social media now, like past, I don't know, year or two or even more, right?
Yeah, I think it's turned into a little more of that, and it can be good or bad, but I guess for me, I use it kind of as a tool to just kind of voice my opinion about certain things. You can write articles on there. So I've written a few articles. I got a lot of pricing questions at one point from different art directors, especially from magazines. And I thought, geez, like, you guys are the art directors. Don't you guys know this stuff? Like, shouldn't you guys have the budgets in place? And it was like this big mystery. And I talked to a lot of other illustrators, and there was such a range. And I understand, it has to do with usage rights. It has to do with the complexity of illustration. It has to do with the deadline. There's so many different factors. As I was doing that research, I kind of put it all together, wrote an article, and now if someone asks me about pricing, I send them the article and say, here, it's a bit more complicated than, I need 3 pictures of dogs lifting up heavy boxes in front of New York City. And that's all. Like, I need to know, where are they being shown, and
exactly. In context.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's not something that everyone understands. Like, I was actually just talking with an art director the other day at an advertising firm, and he didn't understand usage. He didn't know that you paying for the lease of the copyright, which is essentially you're renting the artwork. He didn't understand that. So sometimes I think, as illustrators, we're naturally good teachers because we have to educate all of our clients. Not all of them, but we do have to spend some time sometimes explaining the industry and that sort of thing. So.
Yeah, of course, because sometimes when they are just developing their own startup or a company, they're focused on some other product, and the advertising or marketing is like a
Sure.
byproduct, and they are like, oh, we have to do all of this, and then
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
if you work
Absolutely.
with the other ones, then you have the experience, and maybe we can link the article what you wrote in the
Yeah.
show notes.
Yeah.
That would be
Sure.
cool. And when you mentioned also developing the skills and just going along the way, what helped you the most to develop your skills?
Um, I think really just looking back
Mm-hmm.
at, the fundamentals in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I didn't actually digitally illustrate. I work almost entirely in Photoshop now.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'll sketch in pen and ink or
Yeah.
something like that. And every once in a while I'll pull out the oil paints and I'll just do something like that. But I think for the most part, it's just going back to, the fundamentals. It's these these ideas about composition, about lighting, about color. They've been around for thousands of years, you know what I mean? There's so much to learn from the Renaissance all the way. I mean, that's you got 1,000 years of art right there, right? Um, to look at. And I think that was one of the most helpful things was just getting like a solid foundation, more or less, understanding composition, understanding color theory, understanding all those things. And then you can apply it, then you can learn, how to paint digitally in Photoshop. Then you can learn Corel Painter if you want. Then you can start learning motion graphics and all that sort of thing. But no matter how good you are at understanding, the technical side, for example, of motion graphics, if you don't understand composition, it's never going to look good. Like, it's just not. It's never, ever going to look good. So I think that was the most helpful thing. And luckily, the school I went to, they had a great program, and the foundations
Yeah.
program was really strong. And we spent a couple years, more or less, just learning that sort of thing. So
Did you have some good structure? What you enjoyed, like going from, I don't know, composition, perspective, color and light, or it was kind of everything at the same time and like hour here, hour there?
yeah. Um, well, I think most schools in the U.S. are like this anyways. Um, you take 5 classes a semester or something like that, and you kind of have some choice, and you have to try to figure out your own schedule. And a lot of people are working too part time, so you're kind of balancing everything in that way. But for the most part, I think we started out with like really hardcore design theory. I think it's probably almost out of like the Bauhaus kind of um, a little more modern type of a theory, and then we moved backwards a little bit from there. So when I was taking watercolor and illustration classes and painting classes, that's when we started. It was like the first year was like an introduction. You get drawing, you get design, you get all this stuff just to make sure, I think, that you really want to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then the second year they pull you back and they say, okay, like here are different types of compositions. Here's the golden ratio. We learn about those sort of things, and then by the second semester of your sophomore year, you're learning a lot of color theory and things like that. And by junior and senior year, you're really supposed to be developing your portfolio. And hopefully if you don't get behind or anything like that, that's what you're doing. But for me, I felt a little bit behind sometimes just because I didn't know I wanted to do illustration. I was thinking about graphic design. I was thinking about art education. I was thinking about all these different things. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. And in a way, I think it helped me because I knew that I just had to do the classes that I enjoyed, and I knew that I just had to get better at it, whatever it was I was doing. So in the end, it came back and really helped me, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Because as you mentioned, it's sometimes a lot of pressure when you're just deciding, like, okay, which direction in the art career I want to go, and what can I do, where can I actually earn money, and
Yeah,
kind of in
no,
this
for sure,
thing, yeah.
for sure.
And
And I think that, I mean, that brings up a really good point that
yeah,
that I just wanted to stress in this whole interview is that the idea of a starving artist is so it's so out of date. It's so old school. And there are students who go to school, and I don't understand how you can really justify it, and not have a plan. Um, you have to have a plan, and it's not a problem to earn money doing any of these things. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, it's really not a problem. Um, you can make a good not just get by, because that's the other thing is then, oh, I'm not going to be a starving artist. I'll be able to get some sort of part-time design job in a screen printing shop or something like that. maybe you start the screen printing shop. Maybe you make a lot of money that way.
Yeah.
I have a friend who did that here locally,
Mm-hmm.
and he makes great money. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, there's no reason why, as an artist, we can't think about money as a big motivation, as a big incentive. It should be that way. There's no reason you can't come out of school and figure out how you can make 100,000 a year, U.S. dollars. You know,
Yeah.
in not such a big amount of time. Like, you should have a plan to do that. Like,
Exactly.
if you're planning to make, just to get by, your way of thinking is wrong. You got to change the way of thinking, and it will affect everything else you do, and it will help you in the long run. So
Definitely, yeah, because also like you don't want to be like starving artist, but thriving artist. There was also like a recent book where you, as you've said, like you have to plan, and even when you go to do whatever, like study medicine, you don't expect just to like, okay, now I know how to do it. You always have to
right,
put the
right,
work at the
exactly.
beginning, and then you figure out like uh, being employed somewhere or working on your own or whatever it is you want to do.
Exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. And you have to think about it. Basically, it comes down to thinking about it as a business.
Yeah.
And you know, so you might as well learn about pricing and all those things while you're learning about composition, while you're learning about the art side as well. And if you have to learn about the art side and then learn about the business side because that's, you need a break or you need to really focus on the art,
Yeah.
that's fine too. But at some point, you have to think about it ultimately as a business. If you don't think about your art as a business, you're never going to make any money at it, and
Yeah.
it's not going to be fun in the long run, right? We're not meant to go to school for 4 years, or in Europe, I guess usually it's 3 years, but you're not meant to go to
Or
school
five.
and or here get a master's and go for 6 or more.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not meant to do that and then come out and get jobs doing something else and then just be doing this on the side and with the hopes of that doing that. But also, I'll say this, that you don't have to. A lot of young artists too, they look at the people who are really successful, and of course you can learn something from those people, but there's something to just learn from basic business sense and basic business understanding and fundamentals. You don't have to have 50,000 followers on Instagram to have a successful business. As a matter of fact, I would argue in some ways, and this comes out of a conversation I had recently with a friend who's an art agent.
Yeah.
And I contact different agents every once in a while and have conversations with them. And this guy, he followed me on Instagram, and I follow him now. And he's helped me with a few jobs, different pricing questions. And I asked him, there was this client who I won't mention, but it's a big, really big name client, someone that while you're in school, you would really want to work for.
Yeah.
And I asked him, because I knew some of his illustrators had been working for this client. I said, what do they actually pay for a quarter page? What do they actually pay for a half page? And he kind of gave me the lowdown, what they've made and what they usually give. And the deadlines on this publication are like 2-day deadlines. So it's really quick turnarounds. And when he told me, it was like a third of what I thought it was. And vice versa, I've worked for small clients who, understand the value of illustration, the value that it brings to an advertising campaign, the value that it brings to their publication or whatever it is, and they're willing to pay, what it's worth. So I've learned, in a way, just because you work for the big clients doesn't make you successful. It may give you a lot of followers, but I think that for the most part, our goal, has to simply be to make money, and to try to make money doing what we love the most. And for me, that's been illustration. And in one way, it's come easy, but it's been an interesting journey. And I've learned a lot along the way, and I've asked a lot of questions, and I'm going to be learning for the rest of my life, because the industry is always changing anyway. So
Yeah. Do you have tips for starting artists about what are the questions they should be asking people around them, or maybe the agents?
yeah, I think as an industry as a whole, we have to get a little more comfortable talking about pricing. I think, of course, most people in business, they're not sharing what they're charging and all that stuff. But in a lot of industries, say a small business, people know because they can contact, say you want to get an air conditioner put in your house.
Yeah.
Well, you can shop around, you can call around. As illustrators, we should be talking about those things and seeing, what people are paying, what people are charging, and kind of get an understanding of that. And then also, again, it goes back to the good business sense. You have to do what works for you. So if your style is really labor intensive and you know that you have to charge more, then charge more. You know what I mean? Like, do what's natural, do what makes sense business wise. And don't get sucked into the the social media can be so, like, of course, if you have 50,000 followers on whatever, it's going to be helpful in your marketing for sure. It's going to be helpful, but you can spend so much time sometimes on that and so much time going after, oh, if I could just get this one client and then I could post them that I've worked for this person on the website. And don't get me wrong. I think most of the work that I've done has come from past jobs and from past work and from working with art. It has worked that way, but you can work just as well with local companies doing illustration as you can, working for some big brand that everyone knows hires illustrators. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the little ones, they'll pay you more. So
So how did you start it when you mentioned like your first job was also during the studying years? So did you just send out, as you said, mass emails, or how do you do the networking just to reach out to local companies?
Yeah. Good question. I think definitely didn't start with like postcards and email campaigns and things like that. And I definitely didn't have 15,000 followers on LinkedIn when I was in college. That's for sure. And I don't know if it would have helped me because I was learning a lot, and you got to start out small. You got to talk to people. It was interesting. I worked in college one summer for my now brother-in-law who owns like a construction company. I worked for him and we did roofing. And I was in school and it was just, I had to earn some money, and that's really hard work. And I remember in one way that was a tipping point for me. I realized, wow, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. There's no way. And I didn't plan to do it, but it was really kind of a kick in the butt. Like, okay, I've got to get going. How can I make money doing what I enjoy? And I started out just some local businesses that I knew needed help, needed some new logos or whatever. It was more communication design stuff, and just started like throwing my name out there to studios, especially small advertising agencies, and just saying, hey, I'm available. Do you need anyone who does illustration? Do you need anyone that as a freelancer?
Yeah.
And some work came out of that. Really small jobs, but I made good money for the amount of time that I spent, and especially for my skill level and all that. Yeah. There was a point where I looked back and I thought, geez, I just made $50 an hour. And I thought, wow. Now at the time I didn't realize that in the US anyways, 20% of that is pretty much gone right away to taxes and eventually you got to pay for healthcare and things like that. But it was a revelation in one way at that point in my career. Like, wow, I can earn a lot of money by being the one who's driving the jobs. And I think, some of those bigger jobs kind of, a little bit of luck came together in that way as well. I was in the right place at the right time. I remember I was graduating, and this was another job that came out soon after graduation. And I happened to be in a meeting with one of the vice presidents at the school. And she said, oh, what's your major? And I said, graphic design. And she said, oh, we need someone to design something or other. And I was like, I can do that. You know what I mean? So it was kind of just at the time, just being a little bit, maybe overconfident looking back, maybe having a little bit too much confidence, but it worked out well. I had to do that to get the jobs.
Yeah.
And you learn really fast.
Yeah. And do you have maybe some tips as well about building the LinkedIn following maybe for the art career? Because like a lot of people are focusing on Instagram and maybe ArtStation. So maybe you can give us some tips about LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think, what I'll say about that is just, it is industry specific too. As a visual development artist, if that's what I wanted to go into, or color key or or concept art. I have a lot of friends who do that. ArtStation is probably where you want to be. And Instagram, of course, a lot of people go there because it's so visual. For LinkedIn, I just found a lot of what I do, my illustrations are for like advertising campaigns, and a lot of like publication,
Yeah.
a lot of editorial still, and I also do a lot of licensing, product licensing. So in one way, all the art directors and creative directors and marketing managers and those professionals were already on LinkedIn. So it felt like the natural place to go. And I started, whenever I would reach out to an art director, email wise, I would just shoot him a LinkedIn invitation and usually connect that way. And it kind of just started happening organically. And at one point then people started sending me invitations. And that was cool. I have, a link in my signature. So hopefully everyone that I email connects with me in that way. As soon as I meet them, as soon as I have any connection with them, I try to send them an invite. But at some point, and I post consistently, try to do it once a week, just recent work. And then I also post articles. And at some point, people just started following me, I was finding. And I don't even really know how to follow anyone else. I think if you click on I think there's an option to like connect, or you can like do a drop down menu and follow. I'm not even sure how to do it really, because I don't really follow many people. If I'm going to connect with someone, I'll connect with them. But I just found at one point people started kind of following my work, and I don't know if that was because other people that they knew were following me, or I don't really know at all. But I do know that another illustrator friend who I talked to, he has a ton of followers on Instagram. And I asked him a similar question. I said, you got like 50,000 followers. Like, how did this happen? Actually, I don't think he has quite that many, but he said, like, I don't know. Like, he said, I don't really, there's nothing I did. I don't do paid advertising. I really don't know. And he doesn't follow that many people. But I guess the point is, whatever is working for you, just do that. You know what I mean? You don't have to figure out what other people are doing and try to do that, because it might never work. You might not. You might just. You don't have the. You're not writing the right copy for that area of social media or whatever. Maybe you're more apt to fit the mold for Instagram or Tumblr or whatever it is. You just got to find out what works for you. I guess that's the point.
Or Behance, or there are like many
sure,
of them,
sure.
right? But
yeah.
Ah, cool. Thank you. And that's good for sharing like more options what people have nowadays. Before we continue, let's take a little break, because many of you have been asking me about recommendations for different tools and resources to help you out with many different things, like studying, finding inspiration, overcoming artistic block, managing your time, and freelance. So I decided from now on, in the episodes, I will share with you some of my favorite things which help me a lot, and I'm sure they can help you out too. So let's go take a look. So the first one is Audible, which is the largest audiobook store out there with more than 100,000 audiobooks. And I love listening to stories and learning from books, and even if you are not a book reader, this is a great way to get the knowledge and advice from books just by listening. It would be a shame to miss out on all the great tips if you just don't like to read. I usually listen to audiobooks while I'm traveling, doing housework, or painting. It's very relaxing and I learn a lot. What is awesome, you can get free 30 days trial, which is like getting free books. So try it out for yourself and go to artsideoflife.com/audible. The next one is for all the freelancers and studio owners out there. It's called FreshBooks, and it's an invoice and accounting software that is super easy to use and significantly cuts your time needed for invoicing, getting paid, tracking expense, time tracking, and making proposals. Great part about this is that with few clicks you can export all important data for your tax declaration too. And you can get a free trial 30 days to test it out for yourself too. So go to artsideoflife.com/freshbooks. The last one is trusted house sitters, and as you maybe already know, I love traveling to refresh my inspiration and avoid art blocks, but my budget doesn't allow it so often. Fortunately, I discovered Trusted House Sitters website, where you can do the pet sitting and live for free like a local. I love dogs and cats and all kinds of animals, so it's great win-win. In this way, it's only about buying a flight ticket or travel there by car. Accommodation is for free and you can have great fun with animals, and you can also draw them and practice your animal anatomy skills. It also works for those of you who have pets and are looking for pet sitters to be able to travel. So check it out at artsideoflife.com/ths. You will find more artistic resources, tips, and tools used by me or mentioned in the interviews at artsideoflife.com/resources. So go check it out. And just to let you know, some of the links are affiliate links, which means I will get paid a small commission if you decide to purchase through them, but at absolutely no added cost to you. And in this way, you get a chance to support Artside of Life, which I really appreciate. And now, let's go back to the interview. And if you can maybe share some of your like art process, like some bullet
Sure.
points, like when you start working on an art project, like do you do thumbnails or like research color wise and all of these things?
Right. Kind of walk you through a job, basically.
Yeah, maybe something like a highlights of what you always do or what is important for you.
Sure. I think it's pretty typical. I mean, with the illustration background, I kind of follow that traditional. I get an email from an art director. I want to figure out the deadline, the budget, the contract, if there's an NDA. I want to figure out all that stuff first before I jump into any sort of production. And I found that sometimes the art directors, depending, especially if they don't have a lot of experience, or the newer ones, the younger ones, they'll try to jump into that first, hoping that they'll get, if it's an advertising agency, then the end client, like hoping they can develop something to present to the end client. But you've really, as an illustrator, you've got to get that stuff figured out. You've got to get paid for your work. You've got to figure out exactly what you're doing and what you're making for it. And once you get that contract squared away, then you can start. And for me, I basically, a lot of times just send a few different options, like really simple sketches. Excuse me. It depends on the deadline too. Like a publication, if it's a 2-week deadline, that's kind of a long time. So I'll send 3 or 4 sketches. The art director will have their way in, and then basically they send it back, and I'll start pretty much right away in Photoshop. Sometimes I'll create like a reference type image. I'll definitely do my research and find references on costumes or environment or whatever it is. And then I do more of a finalized sketch, and I'll send that to them usually if there's time. And then once they get approval with that, it's pretty much on me for color. And basically, as far as the Photoshop, the actual production goes, I do, a pretty hard line sketch usually, and I put that on like a multiply mode, and then I work underneath that with the color or value. And then that's usually the time I'll try to get some approval. And then after that, I'll either merge all the layers or I'll just start working on top of them. And I work with a combination of, the regular brush and the blender brush, pretty much go back and forth, whichever one I need. But it's pretty much, it's not like tons of layers. It's not like any tricks. I'm not adding lens flares or adjustment layers. It's really just like hardcore painting, like go in, figure out the shapes, render them out. If they need to be more rendered, then spend some more time. That's pretty much it. By the end, a lot of times the whole Photoshop document is like 3 layers. Sometimes it's 1 layer. So it's pretty straightforward.
And do sometimes your clients like refer to certain paintings you did in the past, like, okay, I would like to have this style, or this is my favorite, or do they always refer to one, or does it differ?
Right. Well, I mean, in talking about my illustration work, because I do a lot of like art directing as well for advertising, and it ends up I pull in a lot of like, I try to use illustration whenever I can. If I can use illustration for that, then I will. But sometimes it ends up being more like photo illustration or like kind of collage type stuff, which is also on my website. But for the most part, when it comes to illustration, I think they come to me because they know what they're going to get. Like the style on my website is pretty consistent, but it's interesting that you bring it up because when I think about style, especially for my work, I really want to at some point make some sort of like a graph, basically where, one end is like graphic and the other end is like painterly, and then one end is maybe graphic and painterly, and then maybe it's like it has to do with color or something like that. So you can kind of like plot different like illustrations, and I think, oh, this is like more painterly, because it is true that sometimes, depending on the size of the illustration, if it's a spot illustration, you're not getting away with a lot of brush strokes that are going to be like visible, right? So there is a range, but for the most part, I think, when it comes to illustration, people come to you because they know what they're going to get. And you don't want to surprise an art director, especially last minute, and they're like, "What the heck? You're trying a new style on? Like, this is a national advertising campaign. What are you doing?" That wouldn't be very smart career-wise.
Yeah, because if they're expecting something from you and then you want to surprise them because they hired you for what you created before, maybe that's a big difference. Yeah,
and it doesn't mean that you can't like expand, but do that. On your own projects, do it on your passion projects, do it on, I think every illustrator should be working on their own, to develop their style. Experimentation, and also like develop things that you can do that are more entrepreneurial than just, I got a call from an art director, like sell prints at local, like I've done really well recently with just in some local galleries, putting prints in, and I don't sell them for a lot, these are like $20, but they're like iconic. I do a lot of like travel poster type stuff, and it goes really well. Like people like that stuff, and they want to they want to hang it in their living room or whatever. That's cool with me. If I can do an illustration and sell prints for the next 2 years, it adds up. And I also use experimentation when I do the licensing work. So a lot of people don't understand, even a lot of illustrators. I didn't even know what illustration licensing was. I think we talked about it maybe once or twice in school, but it was really when I got out where I started going around. I basically is how it works is there's a manufacturer and they need patterns, they need illustrations, they need artwork. Say they create wrapping paper. Well, who does that work? They don't have in-house people, right? All of those are pre-created. They're created as collections by artists, and then they're leased. They're sold, basically, to these. And I know you probably understand this, but I'm just explaining it because
of course, I think it's really important to explain. So if you can expand on that.
Yeah, no, and it's a huge market. It's massive. Like in New York City, every year there's an event called Surtex. Like if you don't know about licensing, come to Surtex. Like. It's incredible how many artists there are, and agents too. I have an agent now for my licensing work, and so I send him new work, and I've done a lot more like poster type stuff, and but he's sold this work on everything from stuff I didn't even think about. He put some of my work on fabric a few months ago. It's like, who even thought you would license your work on fabric? Especially my style, like maybe a pattern, but Because there's so many opportunities.
Exactly. As you mentioned, it's also important to know like how much of the manufacturing there is, because also if there is a limited production and how much customers they will actually bring to the client, or actually the whole revenue. So, if they pay you once and then they have like ongoing revenue from it, then, it's like the value of your work is different.
No, exactly. And I think that can be... that's part of the larger conversation about being successful as an illustrator on your own. Licensing rights, like rights management, good rights management of your work is like, it's the key to building passive income. It's the key to building, to just getting random checks. I get checks in the mail from prints. I get checks in the mail from the licensing work I do, work that I did a year ago, 2 years ago, and that's how you can that's how you can build your business in that way. But yeah, it's true. You got to understand from the get-go. It's like what it's worth. You can't just, sell one time, like get a one-time artist fee, and then the manufacturer turns around and gets product placement in Target or Walmart here in the US. Like, wow, you just let a huge opportunity go. So, and that's why, I mean, my agent has been really helpful with it, because I almost don't have the time to research it and to know how to price it. And he's awesome about that stuff. And he always negotiates when he can. He always negotiates, royalties, which will be a percentage on sale price. So, and a lot of times you'll get an advance on those royalties. So say he sells, he puts your illustrations on Christmas cards, and the advance maybe will be, it's only $300 or something, which it's okay, it's something. But you're hoping to make more money than that. But then he gets you 10% royalties on once you earn back. So once the royalties amount to more than that $300, you just start getting money from that project. And of course I split that, with him. It's a partnership in that way, but it's a really cool like niche of the industry that anyone can do. Like I don't understand. I mean, if I can do it with my style, like I don't do anything with patterns. You know what I mean? If you're a pattern artist, like there are artists who just do that, like, and they make good money. I know a couple of them who, they're illustrators, and they go to Surtex, and they don't usually have reps. They learn the business side, and they spend all winter making patterns, and they put them in the digital files, and they bring them to these bigger events, and they license them, and that's what they do.
So what was the one event you mentioned? Are there other ones you would recommend for people to check out?
Sure. Surtex is the big one, I guess, because it's near me. It's in New York. It's usually in May, I think near the end of May, and it's a big licensing event. It's for artists. It's probably one of the bigger ones. There's a spring licensing fair, and then there's another one in London. And I only know this because my agent is in London, so he goes to all those ones. I'm sure there are other ones in Europe, but then there's another one. It's called the Home. Maybe. Actually, I can't think what it's called, but it's in Atlanta every July. I can't think of the name. It's down south in the U.S. But Surtex is one of the really big ones. And even if you don't go as a vendor, because it can be expensive to get a table, just to show up and walk around, talk to people. There are buyers there, there are agents there, there are artists there. It's everyone in the industry, and it's a bigger part of the industry than we realize, I think. There was an art director for a publication that I was working with recently, and I mentioned licensing to her. I sent her some new work, and I said, hey, this is actually for licensing. And she had been an art director in a production house, like for these patterns for 10 years down in New York. And she told me this, and I was like, it's a really small world, and she knew about it. But how many students know about that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, they don't talk about it usually in like either schools or online schools, because of course you talk about the skills, how you need to develop them, but then afterwards how to apply everything to the real world, that's sometimes a challenge.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And the one in London, it's with the same name, or it's called different?
I don't want to get the name wrong.
Okay, good. So licensing festival. We can put it in the show notes afterwards.
There you go. Yeah, maybe I can send you the link. It's perfect. Honestly, there's not so many licensing fairs. So if you Google London licensing fair or London spring licensing fair or something like that, it'll probably come up. I know there's at least one, maybe two, and I think there are other ones too that I just don't know about too.
Yeah, definitely. It's totally real interesting, like just to see what is there on the market and how your illustrations can be used, or just everything.
No, for sure. And that's something, it's like you grow up and you look in books and children's books, for instance, and you can understand that product because it's well known, right? And you understand, okay, and there's, bios about the illustrators and authors at the end, and you see, oh, this person does this for a living. But it's not like you get a pillow and you look at the pattern and you're like, I wonder who did this.
Yeah,
But someone
yeah.
did it, right? And it's not like I always think about it with wrapping paper, and I always try to buy, cool wrapping paper, even if it's a little more expensive to kind of support the artist, just
Yeah, yeah.
because. But there's someone, at the tail end behind all of this stuff, maybe back two or three people, before the actual sales location, before the manufacturer, before the agent. There's an artist back there, and they're making this pattern, they're making this illustration, and hopefully they're making good money doing it.
Just a nice living from something what you actually love, as you
Yeah,
said.
yeah.
And is there something you wish you knew before you started the whole art career, like advice to young self?
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's hard. It's sometimes hard for me to look back. I think one thing I'm really glad for is that I was always pushed in the direction of just doing what I loved, and finding ways to make money with it. Um, I think I would have liked to know and have done more research, like even in high school, about illustration itself. Like I said, it didn't come onto my radar until I was, halfway done with college, I felt like. And it was just, I mean, I don't know what the reason for that is. Maybe it was my own fault in not looking out and talking to people and that sort of thing. But I think I would have liked to know a little bit more about the industry ahead of time in that way, and also know that it's really viable. Like everyone says, oh, I don't know if you should go to art school because you'll become a starving artist, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It can happen, I guess, but I think if you work really hard and you get really good at what you do, and you find the holes in the market, you find where the needs are, right? Because you can charge whatever you want if you're solving a problem, right? If you can solve someone's problem, then they'll pay you.
Of course.
I don't care who it is or what it is, like an agency or an end client, or whether it's for advertising, marketing, game design, visual development, concept art, publication, editorial, licensing art. It doesn't really matter what. Think about all those opportunities. You can have a career in one of them. You can have a career in multiple. It depends what you want to do, but the opportunities are there. And I wish I had kind of known that. I might have maybe jumped in a little earlier. I might have started doing research a little earlier.
Yeah, just to know
But I don't
what is
want to
there.
look back either and think that things could have been better or something like that. Like it was what it was, and I had fun along the way. And I'm also glad that I had a lot of really good mentors and I went to a good school that I didn't go into a lot of debt for, and I was encouraged by my parents when I was younger. I grew up with several siblings, and I was the only one in the house who had. It was basically a closet, but they emptied the whole closet and they put a desk in there for me, and they let me. That was my
Creative
studio.
space,
Yeah, and I needed that, and I'm really glad looking back. So
Yeah. But of course, then someone else who is just starting out, when they hear this, they can think about it now, like, oh, maybe I can do this, So like they
yeah.
can learn from someone who
Oh,
already been through that.
sure,
And
sure.
if you think about maybe like the most difficult time of your art career, because also that's the time where we learn the most, if you can share like a takeaway from this time or a story.
Sure. Um, I mean, I've thought a little bit about that. I think in some ways it was when I was in school, when I was really trying to tell myself this was what I was going to do. And I started, doing the research, and in a way it was hard because I didn't know what I was doing marketing myself. And the only thing, and a lot of illustrators will say, editorial, that's low hanging apples. It's just an expression we use in English because there are a lot of editorial jobs. They don't pay very well. Some of them do. Some of them pay decent, but they're usually really quick deadlines. But it was the only kind of job that I could see myself doing as a student. And I started researching, okay, who are the art directors? And I think it was just a scary time because I didn't know, like, I was ready to do this. I had some job offers that I could have gone into, and I think if I had told some of my non-art friends that I had that, they would have been like, oh, just do that. But I was afraid that I would get into like a creative rut and I would just kind of end up with a kind of more of a dead end job. And I remember like I went to a bookstore and they had a ton of magazines, and in the front of the magazines they list all of the art directors and publishers and editors. So I literally went through these magazines and just wrote down the name of the magazine and the art director. And I must have been in that bookstore for like 3 hours, just literally writing like every single art director I could think of, or taking a photo, maybe I was. And then I was going to somehow reach out to them on Instagram or LinkedIn or something. And that was, in a way, a tough time. I ended up getting kicked out of the bookstore. They were like, hey, why don't you buy anything? And I was like, actually, I'm just looking through for the art directors. And they had no idea what I was talking about. And they were like, if you're not going to buy anything, you can just leave. And I was like, okay, fine. I don't have any money to buy anything right now. So that was an interesting time, I guess. But I realized, you know what? You just have to work really, really hard and, be honest and do the right thing always, and be easy to work with, and things will work themselves out.
Yeah, exactly. As you also mentioned before, like the passive income where the checks can come later on, it's also you have to put a lot of work before, so it just doesn't happen as you mentioned.
No, it's something you build for sure.
Yeah. And what about like a future? And one of my last questions is like, what would you imagine yourself doing like in 5 to 10 years, like your dream scenario? And then what would you like to be remembered for in like 100 years?
I think what I'm doing now is pretty much exactly what I want to do. I can't say it's all the exact clients and things like that. I hope I'll always get better clients. I think that's one thing we can easily do is I work now as an art director, and I do a lot of illustration work and art direction on the side. And I think when I started art directing more than just illustrating, when I started getting into that more and more the advertising and things like that, then I realized that it was a really good thing. And I was able to go back to some of my clients and be a little bit more firm and say, you know, I don't have to take this job, and this is underpaid. And not all jobs are underpaid. I'm not saying that. Some people, there's no need to negotiate because they're just paying you for what it's worth. But for the most part, I think when you look into the future as a freelancer, as an illustrator, as an art director, you have to simply think about, okay, I have to replace my worst clients with better clients. And if you always do that, then you're always making progress. So I think 5 or 10 years wise, that's probably my goal, is just keep finding clients that, you know, love illustration, keep finding those jobs that really get me excited.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds really good, because also if you have a just bad client, then it takes all your mental energy, and then you cannot focus on anything else, and definitely
We've
doesn't
all had
work
a couple. Hopefully fewer than more.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the last takeaways or advice maybe you can share before we say goodbye, that would be awesome. So, and before that we can say goodbye.
Yeah, I think like long term, when you talk about being memorable or something like that, I think for me it's a little more simple. I don't even have to almost put a year, a timeline on it. And it doesn't have to do with art. I don't know if this is the answer you or your listeners are looking for, but I feel like at the end of the day, you know, we're artists, but we're also people, and I want to just be, you know, easy to work with, fun to work with. I want to do the right thing always. I want to be trustworthy. I want clients to remember me as, you know, someone that helps solve problems, someone that, you know, wasn't so proud that they couldn't accept some input here and there from the art director, someone that was easy to work with, and someone that made other people's lives more enjoyable. So it really has nothing in a way to do with art. I mean, I'm happy that I can do art as I can do illustration, I can do whatever it is as a career, that I can make money at it. But ultimately, it's something we do. It's a small part of who we are, I think. So that's what I'd like to be remembered for in that way.
Definitely. And then also for everyone who is just listening, then they can just do whatever they are passionate about, and they can make a living out of it, as you mentioned previously.
Yeah.
So all can work out.
And as a takeaway, and sorry to interrupt, but as a takeaway, that was one thing I did want to stress, and that's what I wanted to say is like, and it was something that Brandon Reich, he's a well-known graphic designer. He does a lot of like band tees and things like that. And he said this in a talk one time. He said, "You don't have to be well known. You don't have to get some sort of a fame. You don't have to get a certain number of followers on social media. If you're doing something that you enjoy every day, if you go into work and you're like, yes, I get to work on this project." You know, if you're in that position, then you should be really thankful, and you're in a lucky place, because it's a lot better than roofing.
Exactly. Yeah. So but if you enjoy making roofs, that's also another thing.
Sure.
But yeah, enjoying the process of the creation and learning and being part of the project is like a big part of this artistic journey for sure.
Yeah.
So definitely, and thank you so much again for being here. It was so fun.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, and thanks everyone who joined today as well, and see you in the next episode. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe because I post new videos every week. I would be also super happy if you let me know your thoughts in comments and give the video a thumbs up. You can find all the resources mentioned in this episode at artsideoflife.com. Just type a guest name in the search bar. There is also a couple of free artist resources ready for you. So if you want to listen to the interviews on the go too, make sure to check out the podcast at artsideoflife.com/podcast. Continue to inspire each other, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye!